So over the last few years, I've of course been paying very close attention to how the Viper market's been doing, largely in part because I've been debating whether or not to sell my 96. And so of course I've been heavily involved in the Viper community for well over a decade now, and have been online to multiple Facebook groups, forums, whatever have you. And the recent trend has been really toxic, it seems. I don't know if it's a combination of owners and fanboys or people that want to have the car but can't afford one, but the market has been holding these cars back dramatically, in my opinion, for a number of years. And we've been seeing a bit of an uptick lately, but still not to where these cars really should be at. And the way the market is going, the owners and fans and whoever online is just really polarizing and really surprising to me, because you're not seeing this with a lot of the other car communities that I've been involved in. And it's mind-boggling to me. These cars, when they were new, were $60,000, $70,000, and in today's market, that's like $120,000 plus if you count for inflation. So a lot of these cars are still trading for under $100,000. So they're not even hitting what the original MSRP was when you account for inflation. And these cars at this point are in the collectible status because they're over 25 years old. And it's really interesting to see how these cars are being held back so much when you have other cars like your Nissan Skylines and your Toyota Supras and your Fox body Mustangs and your Buick Grand Nationals, GNXs. They're all starting to pull insane premiums. Today we're seeing Grand Nationals and Fox body Mustangs trading for more than Vipers are. They're clearing $100,000 on a regular basis at this point, sometimes even higher. And when you go online, people talking about the Viper and the prices on them, you see a lot of people hating when they're approaching the $100,000 mark and even slightly above that. So I'm saying, oh, these cars aren't worth that. They're never gonna be worth that. Well, how can you say that when you've got Fox body Mustangs, which for a number of years were really just part sources for things like factory 5 Cobra kit cars. And now those cars are just skyrocketing prices. You've got your Buicks, which are a turbocharged V6, and those are commanding insane prices. Of course, you got the Supras and the Skylines that are commanding as high as $250,000 or more, and yet the Vipers are still being held back. And I find that very interesting, and I'm curious to know what my audience out here, what you guys think about that as well. I know we've had some cars, some 96 GTSs have gone as high as $165,000. We're still seeing some big upticks in prices. Overall, the market has trended upwards, and there's been a combination of factors. One is just inflation, but other factor, of course, is the increased desirability and collectability of these cars. I got this one for 9 years ago for about $44,000, I think it was, I paid for this one. And so there's definitely gone up in value from when I purchased it, but nowhere near where I figured it should be at this point, and most people expected. This is on Haggerty's list for future collectibles for cars you should be keeping an eye on. And so I figured by this point, these cars should be trading on a regular basis for more than what their original MSRP was when you adjust for inflation, which means the average price on these cars should be north of $120,000, with your premium examples commanding north of $250,000, and yet we're not seeing that. And so I'm curious to know if it's a combination of things, if maybe it is just because it's a Dodge and it's such a unique market. But it was a dream car for a lot of people in my age group, which is typically what causes the cars to take off in their price points. And I remember when I was growing up, when this car first came out, my dad took me down to Santa Rosa Dodge because they had one on the showroom, and I was just in complete awe of the car. I used to love watching the Viper TV show because, again, of the car. I've still got the poster from when I was a kid of the 96 GTS, and it's now hanging on my wall right up there. And so I don't think there's a lack of desirability for the car, so I'm really curious to know what's holding it back. Is it the fact that owners aren't really appreciating what they're really worth, and so they're just letting them go for really cheap? Is it because we just haven't quite reached that point where the people that really lusted over them as kids are getting to the point where they're willing to spend that kind of money in cars? Is it because the difficulty of getting parts for these cars? When you compare to, say, those other four that I mentioned, the Fox body Mustangs and the Buick Grand Nationals GNXs, your Skylines and your Supras, there's still a decent supply base and aftermarket support for those, where the aftermarket support for this car has been drying up and really didn't get off the ground as much as a lot of people have hoped. So I'm sure there's a variety of factors that I may be even missing here. So I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. I mean, I've backed off on the amount of social media I follow surrounding this car just because of how toxic those forums and Facebook groups have become. And it's just really disheartening to see that community heading that direction. I know since almost day one, the 2005, 2006 Ford GT owners have really banded together as a community to help keep the price on those cars up and beyond. I don't know if there's ever been a time when a non-salvaged one has sold for MSRP or lower. I think for the most part, since day one, those cars have always sold for well over MSRP, and now they're on average, I think, approaching $500,000 when it was a $150,000 car new. So it's just a very interesting situation that I find with this car that I'm not seeing with a lot of other markets. And I'm curious to know what your guys' thoughts are, again, as I said earlier. So what are your guys' thoughts? Do you guys see this car taking off anytime soon? Do you think it's gonna sit where it's been at just because of a variety of factors that I've mentioned or other factors?